Hello, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to today's live broadcast of Replacing Legacy BPM with Proven Code-First Orchestration. I have two guests with me. My name is Marcus Merrill. I'm from Temporal. I'm on the developer relations team. And my guests are actually, let's do the polls first. Let's talk about, I want to introduce these polls with, so have a look at these and see what you think. I want to know, are you part of the temporal journey yet, or are you unfamiliar completely with the platform? Um, while you're answering that, we're waiting for some more folks to trickle in. I want to welcome uh, Jesse Schlienkamp and Jeroen Vollenbroek. Gentlemen, would you like to introduce yourselves?
Yes, thank you. My name is Jeroen Vollenbroek. I'm a principal consultant at Navara and have been involved with the replacement of the legacy BPM landscape of Essent together with Jesse.
Yes, I'm Jesse Slinkamp. I'm a software engineer at Essent, and my team is running temporal workflows now as a replacement of legacy BPM.
Great. Thank you. Well, before we get to the BPM section, I'd like to talk a little bit about temporal because not everyone knows exactly what it is when we first start these kinds of sessions. Jeroen, if you could go to the next slide. Yeah, I'd love to hear where you're from. This is great. South Korea, 2 a.m. Great. Some housekeeping before we start. We'll go for about 45 minutes. I want to hear questions from everyone, if possible. And we will be sending the recording as well as slideware out to everyone as needed. So I appreciate everyone, and yeah, keep chiming in with where you're from. It's always great to hear. I think people all over the world enjoy using temporal, and we like to hear, oh, Kiev, Ukraine. That's great to hear. I've been there several times and absolutely love the place. I'm actually phoning in from the Bay Area, just north of the Golden Gate Bridge in Marin County, and love to see where everyone is from. Someone from Los Gatos, some other Bay Area folks have joined. All right, let's go to the next slide. I want to talk a little bit about temporal. One more. What we are doing here is so my background is in the testing industry. So I've been there 26 years, something like that, as a tester. And when I heard about temporal, what I figured out was that as opposed to the kind of process where you create software, you manage it, you design it, you produce it, then you test it. You're testing and looking for the kinds of errors that I find temporal is actually built to address. So it actually removes the conditions under which most software ends up failing. So API retries, things that happen that you don't necessarily expect, branches in your workflow that you didn't necessarily have to didn't think about, and you can now code up using pure logic instead of hope and pray and just assume that someone did the exception handling correctly. We help you deliver more reliable and faster features to market. So if we go to the next slide, we could talk a little bit more in detail. So what it does is it abstracts away the complexities that you have around retries, rollbacks, and state management. So you no longer have to worry or have to think too hard about introspecting to find out what state the software was in when a failure occurred. It's all right there present and preserved through the temporal state management system. You can also choose any programming language you'd want. You could Python is growing in popularity, but it's competing with Golang and Rust and C Sharp, Java, and pretty much any programming language you want. TypeScript. We even have a Ruby SDK at this point. Truth is, there's even someone that uses Haskell, if you can believe that. This will also allow you to deploy and run code within your own environment or using the Temporal Cloud, where we host the state management for you. And finally, one more bullet. The durability layer helps you recover when a failure does occur. So with that slight introduction into temporal, we'll get into the actual business process management topic that Jesse and Jeroen are here to talk about. Go ahead and take it away, gentlemen.
Thank you, Marcus. So let's quickly provide you some context about Essent as a company and Navara. Jesse, would you like to introduce Essent?
Yes, sure. Essent is an energy company, retail company in the Netherlands, the largest leading energy supplier in the Netherlands, about 3 million customers, and quite an old company, over 100 years of history, and a lot of transitions in there. Ever since the energy crisis that we had in the Netherlands as a result of, for instance, the war in Ukraine, we changed our ambitions to become a tech-driven company. So this is the ambition to become the one-stop energy shop. This is where you can do all your energy requirements you can get at Essent, and it's also driven by tech in the background. Because to do this product portfolio that you see listed there, to steer all that, to sell all that, and to manage all that, you need a very robust digital infrastructure. I have about 300 engineers as colleagues, and we deliver very interesting and beautiful software.
Thank you. Yeah, and so I'm from Navara. Navara is an IT consulting company in the Netherlands. We basically focus on engineering business performance, so making sure that if you are a company and you are in a transition and you want to become more tech-minded, more tech-driven, well, that's basically where we excel at. So we do a lot of digital transformations, also system integration programs. We have 7 locations in the Netherlands with about 300 engineers. We're also a Temporal partner, and well, we operate in the following 6 domains. And that's also how, well, basically Essent and Navara got together to talk about their legacy IT landscape. And that's because low-code BPM became quite a big bottleneck for innovation. And that has everything to do with the fact that this is a platform where you really work in a way that is not always as compliant with industry standards, like testing, just writing code, collaborating on it together, especially if you have a older BPM engine that doesn't have any collaborative features. You rather quickly move to things like Slack channels where you have to claim a certain file so that no one else can work on it, and then you can quickly edit it, and well, that basically started to slow us down, especially due to the age of all of our workflows as well, because it becomes difficult to maintain and work on them. People tend to not do that, and that makes your workflows age and become even more difficult to understand and to iterate upon. So tech debt was accumulating. We didn't really have things like CI/CD in place. It was mainly still manual deployments. And yeah, that really started to hit our change rate. So we got quite a low deployment rate, quite a low change rate, and actually quite a high change failure rate, because we started doing big deployments with many changes. And if you do many changes at once, well, it's quite likely that there is a mistake somewhere in there, and then you need to fix that, of course, and do another deployment. And on top of all of this, we also started seeing more and more vendor lock-in, because it's quite difficult to migrate away from these platforms as well. And of course, vendors of these platforms know that and start to drive up the licensing costs as well. So yeah, all in all, we were faced with the question, how can we migrate to a more modern way of working that really enables innovation and agility, but in a way that we manage to keep our existing business for our millions of customers intact, because we can't just close shop and go into a maintenance window for a while. So it's really about changing the light bulbs while keeping the light on, and that's quite an interesting challenge. So yeah, that's what we are going to talk about in this webinar, because this is something that is not just isolated at Essent. This is something that we've seen in a lot of different companies as well. Probably some of this resonates with other industries and other fields. And in that, we found a really good partnership in Temporal as a platform, because it addresses a lot of these complications and concerns in a really nice way by just making sure you can build and maintain your workflows as any other piece of code in your landscape. So it allows you to T-shape your workflow engineers. It allows you to make sure that there's proper testing practices in place. And this is really the golden bullet we were looking for. So what we did is we started with manual migration. We identified a workflow and determined, well, this is a good candidate to change into a temporal-based workflow. Of course, there's more parts of a BPM engine than just the orchestration part, right? There's also things like case management or maybe some user interface. If you need a manual intervention with your process, then you might need to enter some data. So we looked at this entire end-to-end customer onboarding process, and we started to make a temporal workflow to do that instead. And the learnings that we got there were actually quite interesting because even without really having it as a intended outcome, we noticed that we started building a workflow that resembled the legacy workflow quite a lot. And it has everything to do with cost, because if you want to gradually migrate a workflow and you have a legacy system and a new system, whenever you do that piece by piece, it becomes quite costly because every time you migrate a single piece, you need to deploy and version both sides. So a lot of the change involved with that actually is applied twice. And especially if one of those sites is a platform where you still rely on manual testing quite a lot and you have like runbooks to go through, each of these iterative changes actually starts to eat up most of your resources and effort that you put into this migration. And at the same time, if there is actually a business change that needs to go through and you have like a part in an old system and a part in a new system, well, you need to apply that change twice. You might have long-running instances of your workflow. They are in the old system, but you might already have new instances in your new system. So while you are in this dual phase, the cost just really rises, and that results in trying to speedrun this migration and making sure that we get to the new stack as quickly as possible with as similar as a rewrite as we can make. Because once we are there, we can actually drive quick change and we can start iterating again without those costs. So we had quite a successful first manual migration, but it became a de facto one-on-one rewrite. And even though it was a one-on-one rewrite, we actually got some great results. So the deployment frequency went up eightfold. We had a way faster lead time for changes. Our change failure rate went actually below the single digits. For those rare occasions where we did have a mistake in our production landscape, we could either solve that without downtime or with a really low time to get it to production because of all of the durability features that Temporal has to offer. So this is all data sourced from our ticketing systems or GitLab environment, ServiceNow, etc. As you might be able to imagine, these numbers really made us want more. Right? We didn't have just one big process with a few workflows, but we actually had over 500 of them. So we set out to define a roadmap where we said, well, let's first try to not just go close to a one-on-one conversion, but let's actually start with a full 100% equal one-on-one technology conversion, where we move from our legacy landscape to temporal-based workflows. And if we do that, we open up the possibility of also automating a lot of our tests, because we can generate snapshots from the audit trails of our old system. We can apply them to our new workflows and actually validate and prove that they are the same. So that's just one of the benefits that we get. Another benefit is that we can try to automate this conversion as well. So we can actually try to build a compiler or a transpiler that just imports an existing workflow and then outputs a temporal-based workflow that does the same thing, including that test framework. Well, once we're there, we can establish control, because this is going to be generated code based on legacy workflows that potentially haven't been touched in a few years. So there is a lot of tech debt that's already present. It's already there, but it suddenly becomes a bit more visible. So we need to address that and solve it. So we need to improve our CI/CD capabilities. We need to add more test scenarios, automation. Maybe look a bit into like things like behavior-driven design and see if we can embed that more in our integration scenarios and our end-to-end tests. And all in all, just refactor the workflows to make full use of all of the possibilities that Temporal has to offer. Because maybe there are a way easier way to do things compared to the older legacy workflow. Well, once we're there,
Jeroen,
yeah.
sorry, I really just got a question on this slide right here because there's so many moving pieces and there's so much. I mean, you have a large system and a large company full of engineers, managers, product managers, directors, VPs. There's testers. How do you get alignment between all these groups on the moving forward for this big of a project? Can you give me an idea of how the process is to actually get people to nod their heads and say, yes, this is a massive undertaking that we do want to pursue?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Initially, when we hit this stage, we already established within the company that we needed to replace our BPM landscape because it was just limiting too much of our roadmap. So we got basically lead times that were too high to be acceptable for change as soon as it started affecting the BPM landscape. But from there, picking this approach actually opened up a way to not have this impact our regular portfolio process. So a lot of the stuff from step one is something you can do in parallel while regular development is working. Because if you have a transpiler and you automate the stack conversion, you can just keep developing in your old legacy landscape for as long as you want to. You don't even have to migrate all of the workflows at the exact same time. So by picking this approach, we actually did not have any clear demands or questions from our regular development workforce, and they could just continue working as usual.
Wow.
But as soon as we got this system in place, we actually also shortened the migration timelines per process. So I'll get to that in a bit.
For us,
But yeah.
what was very we saw that especially at step two, there was of course a lot of resistance in a team initially, where the conversation was, yeah, but we got to own all these converted processes then, and we don't really know what they're about because we're just going to end up with code that comes from there. But the whole understanding should be we already owned this code. It was just hidden away in legacy BPM flows. And now it would become something that we could actually understand, that we can have test automation on, have observability on, and run CI/CD, something that we couldn't do before. So rather than it didn't remain hidden, where the problems were still ours, but we just, you can ignore them because, oh, that's just in the legacy part. Now they become open and improvable, which is what we're working on now.
So just to make
and
sure,
regarding like the roadmap and the program management, so what we actually did here as well is just set a deadline on the migration, but not be too specific about how you get there. Right? If you think you can do a full redesign yourself or go the manual route, that's also fine, as long as you meet the deadline.
and then you have feature flag to cut over, like kind of all at once, yeah. And then the user doesn't know any different. It's just a back end change series of workflows. Now, so let me just make sure I understand. When you use the transpiler, that is, you convert the old code base, and now you're working on the new code base. That is what is checked in. That's canonical. You're no longer hacking on the old stuff and then regenerating it every time, correct?
Yes, but it is a very conscious moment where you actually switch that mindset, right? So
right.
we do have a pipeline that actually can run on demand or on a timer to just keep converting the legacy workflows. It just ingests all of the definitions from the legacy BPM software. It runs it through the transpiler, and it makes a Git commit to a new project where we just have all of the workflows and all of the projects standing by. And as a team, like the team that Jesse is in, you can check out that code and you can actually see it before even running it anywhere. This opens up a lot of possibilities, right? You can use it just for analytical purposes and use it as like an explainer to a software engineer to make it more tangible what the workflow is actually doing. You can use it to like copy activities from and still make like a workflow yourself. Or you can just go all the way and pick up the project, which we also tailored to the architecture through our templates that Essent likes to run it as. So in theory, you can pick up that project entirely, copy it over to a actual owned repository by the team, and then start developing on there and putting it live. But we'll get to that later today.
Cool.
So yeah, and of course, once you're there and once it's running in production, it opens up this route to iterate and improve on your processes, and also start creating business value without being held back by all of that legacy.
Great.
So if we look at the way that this transpiler is constructed, so Essent uses the TIBCO Active Matrix BPM4. And it's a product consisting of various modules. There's the workflows, there's activities, there's scripts that you can run before or after activities, or even in your workflow. There's a UML-based modeler where you can make data models. There's a form builder where you can make forms that need filling out as a step inside your workflow. So you can have like a workflow that then pauses, waits for one of those forms to be filled out, and then it continues. And it has a big audit trail capability where it keeps track of basically the event history of your processes. Then we built the transpiler at Navara in between that basically takes all of the things on the left together with the configuration and templates. So those templates are tailored to what Essent would like to see as an output. Together with the configuration, like how do we map the existing workflows into the target apps. There's 500 workflows divided over 12 domains. And we decided that each of these domains needs to be one app. So even though there's basically one bucket of workflows on the left, on the right we actually get those 12 temporal apps that we can independently put live and deploy. And those of course contain temporal workflows, activities, scripts, data models, and forms. And in this case, we converted into TypeScript, which is already being used for all of the integration and backends at Essent as well. As a little side bonus, we also generate diagrams and dependency graphs of all of the processes, so you can actually see how the workflows interact with each other, what kind of data they rely on. If there's maybe data in one workflow that is being used from other workflows as well, because that helps you to isolate the apps into independently deployable modules without having other people access your data without going through an API or stuff like that. And it also generates the snapshot testing framework. So you can load in the audit trails on the left. You can store them in a file. You can even anonymize them and make them part of your code base. And the snapshot testing framework will just take those audit trails or those snapshots of those audit trails and run them against your temporal app in order to flag whether or not your new workflow is behaving in the exact same way as the old workflow. So this is really what we use to build up confidence before we go live, because we can actually show without that much of an effort that whatever is being generated at least performs the same way as the old system did.
There's a question in the chat, and I'm curious. Once we actually get to the right-hand side, I imagine that transaction volume hasn't changed. What kind of transaction volume are we generally talking about? I would think it would depend on the 500 workflows that have been converted. But what are the larger ends of the ones you're seeing?
I know that we have workflows that, for instance, process energy meter readings, and they run on a daily basis, several times per customer. So that's a lot of workflows. We also have things like when a customer files a complaint, it becomes a workflow. The handling of a complaint hopefully happens.
Hopefully
less
those are
than
lower volume.
Yeah, than the meter readings. But I think in total we are talking about approximately 200,000 cases per month. That is a case is usually a collection of several workflows.
Right.
So yeah.
Right.
Um, Yeah, so of course you all want to see what that looks like.
Mhm.
So what we see on the right is a BPMN diagram. It's a standard notation used by the BPM software that we previously used. And on the left we see basically the output of the transpiler, and yeah, this is really constructed in quite a systematic way. So we detect the parts where we have a loop in the workflow on the right. We turn that into subhandlers. And you can actually just map this all one-on-one. So once you have a start event, well, we want to invoke an activity to do the audit trailing for that. Then we have something called send email. Well, that's just also activity within the workflow. Yeah, and in a very methodological way, we just take all of these arrows and blocks and convert those into functions and function calls. And this is really the core of the system. But of course, there is also yeah, the fact that these activities themselves contain logic, right? In your BPM software, you can say something like make an API call. So we also need to generate code that belongs to these activities themselves. Like you will get a structured way that defines a body and maybe some JavaScript embedded in line in your old workflow that now needs to be embedded in a activity. So yeah, this is the core of the workflow conversion, but there's also activity conversion, script conversion, form conversion, and those are all modules that we built into the transpiler.
So the transpiler understands the difference between a workflow and an activity, and does it enforce things like idempotency and determinism into these, or does it just convert kind of one to one, and then you're on your own to fix?
Yeah, so this is one of the challenges that we spend a lot of time on.
Yeah.
Because if you have a diagram of a workflow, the fact that it's a static diagram should ensure some level of idempotency, as long as all of the external interfaces and randomness and other kinds of things that you want to use do not happen in the workflow function, but in activities. So we erred a bit on the safe side there, so, and basically moved everything that could be non-deterministic or not really focus on the idempotency towards the activities. Yeah, in BPM, you do not have a strict deliver once implementation, whereas in Temporal it's at least once. So
Yeah.
with the testing, there are a couple of things we really need to be conscious of there. Yeah, that's all.
Yeah.
Things that we needed to find out in the first process. We'll get to that in a bit.
Right. Right.
And yeah, the majority of fixes that you need to manually do is of course on that side as well. Yeah.
Right. So this visualization on the right, is that something that the transpiler does, or is that BPM in that produces that?
It's actually both. So the legacy BPM product here used XPDL as a format to describe
Mm.
the workflows. That's also an open standard, but it's a somewhat older standard. And the modeling software that we use within Essent to also talk to our business stakeholders and make a overview of the process that we have supports BPMN2, which is a newer standard. So one of the things we made a module for in the transpiler is converting that. So we take a XPDL as input, which looks really, really similar to what you see on the right, but it's not exactly the same. And we turned it into a BPMN diagram that we outputted. And that
Right.
is, yeah, what we see here.
I would
So
like to
if
enrich the answer to that question a little bit because the question I
yeah.
think is specifically asking about sharing it with non-technical people for the
Right.
business. I think for engineers to be able to own a process and fully understand the process makes the conversation so much easier that we can actually talk about what is happening in the process. So the missing of a visual a legacy style visual diagram is actually not a problem anymore when you can actually have a conversation about what is happening in your process. This
Mm.
process, the conversation is so much richer after you move it over to code.
Yeah, and I
Okay.
think Maxime wrote a blog post on the Temporal blog about why your next workflow should be code and not a diagram. I fully agree with the contents of that.
Yeah. Mm.
It's there's so much details on the right that are actually hidden, because it doesn't, for instance, it doesn't really contain anything about the kind of data that is being thrown around in this workflow, right? And on the
Absolutely.
left, you need to have this. So this is one of the things we really had to work around in this initial conversion, because we just make a type definition called a workflow context where we keep track of all of the variables and data that is being thrown around in that workflow, because we can't really scope this down to activity level, because that's simply not built like that, like that in the existing situation. So I wouldn't say that these workflows on the left are really pretty to look at, but they
Hmm.
are a really good basis for refactoring. And refactoring
And
from here to something that is actually clear and maintainable is way easier than completely rebuilding this entire workflow
yeah,
from scratch, especially if you have to do it like 500 times.
and you can always tweak and extract, make this read very linearly, if you really wanted to. You could remove some of the noise from this if you needed to, but yeah, I agree with you completely.
Yeah, for sure.
Um, yeah, some
And
people
this
in
is
the chat
also
are,
where AI is really coming in handy,
yeah,
right? Now that we
yeah,
have more agentic AI and things like Copilot and Cloud Code being at our service, we can also utilize those tools way more for this. So
right.
as long as the initial conversion is fully deterministic and predictable in what the output is, well, you can
Mhm.
then use the generated tests and tools at your disposal to refactor it to
Yeah.
something that's not exactly the same.
And this is Navara produced the transpiler, correct? Or was
Yeah.
it Essent? Yeah.
No, so
Okay, great.
we built it at Navara, but Essent was the first customer and use case. So we heavily collaborated with Essent on requirements and output, but we made it very configurable. So we also have another team working currently on Camuna conversions and converting into Java projects, for instance. It's really depends on what the intended output is, and we
Yeah.
can adjust that.
That's someone in the chat is specifically asking about that Camunda, and they're wondering if it'll be open source.
Yeah, so we are working on Camunda. We have had talks with other companies that are facing the exact same problems, but with Camunda instead of TIBCO BPM. I'm not sure. Like if you want to get in touch and discuss that, feel free to reach out, and we can definitely zoom in on that as well. But all of the principles and patterns that we apply to BPM here are generic enough to be applicable for both systems. And Camunda in that sense also uses BPMN2 as a file format, and also has like activities in Java delegates. So
Cool.
that's really cool.
Great.
Um,
Thank you.
it's unfortunately not open source, and that also has a lot to do with the fact that the output really depends on the requirements, and we haven't built a full feature complete implementation of the source BPM systems, because we analyze the BPMN source files of Essent in this case, and we start building the feature set into the transpiler that is needed to convert all of the processes that are in use, because that's a way smaller set than all of the explicit features. So as we convert more BPM workflows, the transpiler becomes smarter and more feature complete. So maybe at some point we will be at a stage where we can do that.
Great. Great. Thank you. I want to mention that we found Max's blog post about visualization. So that's in the chat if you'd like to look for it. Thank you, Hannah.
All right. So of course, what does a project like this look like in terms of timelines? So we started with some discovery, which is where we analyzed all of the BPM projects and files, the XPDL diagrams, the data types, etc. We did a feasibility study to really get a bit of a feeling on what would be in scope of a transition like this. Then we started extending the transpiler with all of the different activity types that are in use. We started collecting snapshot data. We set up a conversion pipeline to just run a full conversion every night. And anything that isn't implemented just emits not implemented throwing code. So from a very early stage, we could actually capture the percentage of workflows that we could successfully convert. And then we could capture the percentage of workflows that actually pass tests. And we could see that percentage going up. So this was really data driven. We had a team of approximately 10 engineers working on the transpiler. And improving those numbers day by day until we reached the point where we said, hey, let's roll out the target repository and make sure that all engineers can start using this in production. And that's also where Jesse came in, of course, and his team together with the training and the handover there. That's a high over timeline of a transition project. As long as you use a transpiler, you can actually make this happen quite quickly. So what the output of the transpiler looks like, I thought it would be nice to show that as well. So what you see on the right is just one Git repository within Essent, and it contains two folders, an output folder where we generate all of the projects. That's front-end projects containing forms in Angular. And it's the Temporal projects as Docker containers that are deployable and ownable by other teams. We also generate all of the documentation, images, diagrams, and we have some manually created documentation mainly that we generate as well, that we store as well in this repo. So this is one contained repository containing all of the output. And this is all controlled by pipeline. So whenever you have changes on the BPM side, you can run that pipeline to get all of the latest BPM sources in this repo, including workflows, activities, forms, interfaces, diagrams, and snapshot testing harnesses with some, not with the actual data. You need to capture that using a different tool. But that's basically plug and play as long as you can capture the audit trails and put them in the snapshot data. And in each of these projects, there's a README file. And in that README file, there's like a full checklist of all the steps you should go through as a team before you can route production traffic to this. And in addition to this repo, we also built some canary release proxies that we can put in between the existing BPM engine and the new projects. And that way we can slowly start sending a percentage of newly requested executions to Temporal while also keeping the rest on the old stack. And we use that for validations, right? So once you have converted a project like this, you can say, well, let's handle 2 instances in the new stack, see how they go. And then if they are okay, well, we can make 10% go to the new stack, and we can slowly ramp that up until 100% of the new executions are being routed there.
In practice, we found you shoot through a couple, you see it goes well, and then you shoot it open to 100%, because what do you need 10% for if you can run all through them and it just goes?
Yeah. If you're running 200,000 a day, if you get through 1,000, you're probably set.
That's right.
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 I'm curious how, and stop me if you're talking about this in the future, but how much work you had to do in tuning the workers themselves, the temporal workers, which actually do the execution and processing. Did you have to tune those, or are you going to, if you're going to talk about it, that's fine.
I can tell you a little bit about the integration process that we had that fits very well with the timeline of this presentation. Because we are software engineers and we like to do difficult, complex projects. The first one that we tried to integrate, the first process that we tried to integrate, the complaints process, took us about 3 weeks to pull it out of the converted apps, to integrate it fully into our landscape so that we got it deployable and running on test, and then to production. It was 3 weeks in total. And as I said, because we're software engineers, we figured, okay, the next one we're going to do in a week because this can be faster and faster and faster. And I think in the end we set it up. The last one we wanted to do in a single day, but we forgot to configure something in our cloud, so it took a day and 2 hours to get the last one integrated
How
and
dare
deployed.
you?
Yeah, that's can't think of everything.
Yeah, and just to be clear, so these are not single workflows, right? This is really a collection of several child
Yeah.
workflows and a parent workflow that forms a complex interaction of executions.
The
So I,
entire the entire complaints process for Essent, where from the start of a complaint made by an agent all the way through with the forms, with multiple steps in the complaint process, calling the customer, everything, the whole process got put live in that one go.
so I'm curious then about some of the more um, complex features of temporal, like compensations. Do those come out of the transpiler, or compensation actions? Which, by the way, compensation is something where you have step one, two, and three, and if step three fails, you have to undo the actions, the change of state that steps one and two took. Did you have to code those up by hand, or are they actually part of the transpiler, or does it matter?
Oh, yeah. So that's actually a great question. So a while ago we had a virtual meetup about saga patterns, which of
Mhm.
course ties into
Yeah, we
this
could link to
quite
that.
well. And in that, well, of course, in any BPM flowchart, you can do the saga pattern, right? You have basically the activities at the top, and then you can just design the compensation actions at the bottom and make arrows pointing down to those compensation actions to implement the saga pattern in BPM. But since the transpiler just converts any diagram that we see in the workflow towards code into this new paradigm, it actually translates the saga pattern as well.
Cool,
So yes, it fully supports it, but we didn't have to build anything specific to support it because it's already supported in the BPMN diagrams notation as well.
cool. That's great.
We did have to, of course, map other things like there's timers. Well, you can map those to temporal timers. There is things like human in the loop. If you have a form, so what we do when that happens is we make an activity that waits for a signal, and then we have a separate app that has a little data store with forms to be filled out, with the data of the
Hmm.
forms to be filled out. And for this form, we start a child workflow that does everything from waiting until an employee opens the form, then fetching all of the hot data that form might need to display, waiting for the employee or the agent to fill out the form, um, validating the form, and then submitting that back as a signal to the parent, where the actual workflow can continue. So each of these BPM patterns, of course, need some kind of a temporal target to convert it to, and very often it's almost one-on-one. But sometimes you run into more complicated structures or blocks that do not have a one-on-one target. And in that case, well, we need to emit something that mimics that behavior. But luckily, there's a lot of primitives we can use to accomplish that, and then that's what we do in those cases.
Makes sense. Great. Thank you.
So yeah, what you see here is the result. I think it was taken a few days ago. So by now we on the first process we had over 7,000 workflows, majority completed. We had a few fail in the past, but I think that was also from the early days. And it consists of 35 workflow functions, 97 activities, and 10 forms. Now we went to the second project. So this is, as I mentioned, we did it in 1 week. Also a couple of thousand workflows. Yeah, and now we are in the process of converting the most complicated process that we had in BPM. It's the move process, basically when a customer moves from one address to a different address. There's a lot of race conditions and other things that we need to cover in that case, right? If you move out to a different location. You have to deal with energy contracts on those addresses and make sure that that aligns all. So this is quite a big process with a lot of edge cases. We basically think if we can convert that one, we can convert anything. So once we hit that milestone, the rest of the processes are going to be peanuts to convert. And of course, we're going to be aiming for that one day minus the 2 hours for sure for the next ones.
Cool. Are there any workflows that you're planning that you haven't implemented yet that particularly terrify you or make you think, oh my gosh, what's going to happen with this one when we push it?
Not really. I think we looked at all of the different patterns, but there are, of course, things that we haven't put live yet because the workflows we've put live so far haven't used those functionalities.
Hmm.
One of the things that kept me up at night was, for instance, workflows that use something called a global signal, where a workflow can
Yeah.
just emit, broadcast any kind of data package, and any other
Yeah.
workflow can pick that up and react on it. We have
Yeah.
those. We needed to implement something to deal with that. So we have like a little signal catching proxy that can listen in on both ends for those signals. And then wrap a process in the other stack back and forth. So if you have a signal that's emitted in your temporal app, we can actually propagate that signal back to the BPM landscape just in case there are any processes there that also listen for that signal, and the other way around. So we can have processes in BPM that emit a signal, and then something in temporal needs to be waiting for that. That's I think the most difficult use case we'll have to encounter in this.
The interesting thing about it is that it's always all these difficult steps that we encounter are examples of they're not TIBCO complexity in itself. They are just legacy complexity of interesting systems that have been built in an interesting way. And now when you start converting this code, you run into choices that have been made over many, many years. And those are sometimes hard to deal with. If you look at the process itself, maybe it can be done a lot simpler, but you only know once you've opened the box.
Right. Um, yeah, that brings me to a whole bunch of interesting questions, but I'll defer to the chat at this point. There's one question I think is fascinating. What's the best approach for migrating tenant-specific BPM workflows in a multi-tenant SaaS from a legacy BPM system to Temporal? Does that question make sense?
Yeah. Um, I think it would actually look very similar to what we're doing here.
Hmm.
But I think the secret sauce is in the, so to say, is in the canary releasing. So if you have something like that, you're probably gonna have generic workflows, maybe some deviations that are customer specific or tenant specific. Of course, assuming a lot of things here, but
Yeah, of course.
one of the things we can really do in that canary release proxy is establish conditions based on which we route the workflow to the new stack or the old stack. So that really gives you a lot of flexibility in going in any kind of order you want. If you want to go big bang, sure, you can configure that and do that. If you want to go big bang per workflow, you can do that. If you want to go customer by customer or any kind of other kind of pattern, as long as you can describe the selection logic in code, you can put that in the canary release logic and make sure that it's happening in that order. But it's highly specific on the context, of course. I remember I once pitched the canary release idea to a company that said, "Oh no, we do sprint releases. Please don't do a canary." So it really depends on what your needs are. But what we aim for with this transpiler approach is having the tools available to make those scenarios work.
That makes sense. Yes, see, I may have misread. Did you have anything to add to that on the multi-tenant issue?
No,
Okay,
no, I don't.
that's fine. Okay, then next question would be that what if BPMN is based on subject matter knowledge, like compliance knowledge, stuff like that, where the user of the workflow is the one that's actually having to produce more than just the activities of the workflow. Um,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah, if the user converting the workflow to temporal does not have that SME expert knowledge, what's your best approach for handling that? That might be more cultural than technical.
it's something that caused a lot of debate within our organization as well. And I think this idea of citizen development on paper looks really nice, right? You can have a subject matter expert make the flowchart and maintain it, and yeah, then your BPM solution really offers added value over doing this in code because you don't need the software engineers in between. But the problem is the abstraction levels, right? It's one thing to do a happy flow in BPM, but once you start adding all of the exception handling and all of the resiliency requirements, I've seen workflows that are literally 5 consecutive steps blow up into a diagram with sub-diagrams that you couldn't even open up on your screen anymore. That's how big the
Right.
BPM workflow became.
Multi-dimensional, right? I mean,
Yes, yes, and that's because all of those things have edge cases and things that you need to add. And once you enter that point where you productionalize this process, there are so many lower level constructs and compensations and edge case handlings added that your subject matter expert will look at this and probably be like, I'm not sure if I'm comfortable maintaining this by myself anymore.
Absolutely.
And that's what we've
And
seen with these BPM workflows as well. They tend to, well, I can say for sure that 100% of those workflows ended up being maintained by engineers, even though they did not have the intent of being maintained by engineers.
And subject matter, the experts, they change, they move on, the code stays there, or the processes stay there, and the process grows and grows and grows until you have no idea anymore what is happening. And then the new expert always interacts with some kind of, like Jeroen said, some kind of abstraction of what the process actually is. What we found that a lot of paths in the code that we were converting weren't even used anymore. They were from long, long time ago, and nobody knew what they were for. Even though at some point it was a very useful path that was in there, but it's fallen into ruin almost because nobody knew anymore what it was doing.
Yeah, and I think this also ties into why your graph, why your workflow should not be a graph. I think a graph is a really powerful tool to explain your intent, right? But it doesn't contain all of the information. So if you have a subject matter expert, please let them make a BPMN diagram to explain to engineering what needs to be implemented. It's a
yeah,
perfect tool for that because you can describe in a really abstract way what the process should look like. And maybe you can almost one-on-one convert that into a temporal function, but you'll probably add things like data handling and exception handling to it as well, making it more complicated than the initial high over diagram would look like.
Absolutely. And we're doing software engineering in the end here, right? We're trying to build complex systems that can handle scale and that are resilient, and it requires engineering. It requires people who have a hand on the system, who know what the system is doing, how it's functioning, and that they can change and interact with it. And that those are software engineers. So the more empowered they are to work on their product, the more comfortable and more proficient they are in communicating with the business or uh, any other partners in getting a functional system up and running.
great. So there's another question from Mohit. Mohit Mishra says he's interested to hear how are we handling work item and user management? Those are like proper nouns from the TIBCO AMX system to temporal. And there's other questions about user-based IAM management in the chat as well. How do you handle that kind of migration when you move to temporal?
Yeah, so we actually opted to migrate that to a different tool that we already had in use. We had a work stack allocation solution within Essent. It was based on Verint Operations Manager. We were actually doing a lot of work item stuff double. We were doing it in the BPM, the TIBCO BPM case manager, but we were also doing the work allocation in a different tool, and we streamlined that. So we really made clear responsibilities where we say Temporal will do the orchestration and just the orchestration. Then we have a work stack management context where we do the actual allocation and the agent handling. And we have a separate environment. It's an application built in-house within Essent called the Agent Cockpit. That's where we do case management. That's where we converted all the case forms and overviews towards. So we split up those responsibilities to make sure that we use the best tool for the job in all three of those areas instead of going for like the Swiss Army knife approach.
Cool. Cool. Great. There's one more question, then we'll start to wrap up everything. So there's a question about CI/CD. Are you so how are you managing CI/CD through BPM? And it's like it BPM can use CI/CD storing in GitHub Jenkins. How do you manage that conversion when you go to Temporal if someone is using that within a CI/CD system?
So we do have CI/CD. Well, we basically have version control for all of the BPM processes at the moment. There is some CI/CD pipelines in there, but since you have an editor where you edit these things, you can't really utilize the full feature set of Git-based working and CI/CD-based pipelines, right? You can't work on the same workflow with two persons. You'll get a merge conflict, and then yeah, you need to pick one. You can't really merge the merge conflict without going through the XML of the diagram and fixing that up yourself. But it's not a blocker, right? If you have a working CI/CD pipeline, it only becomes easier. You could add a step into that CI/CD pipeline to basically upload a snapshot of your code towards the transpiler and get it converted on the fly or whenever there's a change in there.
I mean, that makes sense. It seems pretty straightforward. Someone is saying, is they're new to Temporal. Is there any benchmark data or report related to the performance and scalability of Temporal? I know for a fact that we have individual customers who are running Temporal actions on the order of tens of billions per day. And we've not noticed, degradation. We've got a whole bunch of nines. Have you noticed anything like that? Anything like we will try to find benchmark data, but have you ever noticed a slowdown as a result of temporal that is
Actually, we, we,
noteworthy?
we noticed the opposite.
Hmm.
We noticed that we had race conditions in our old workflow that never materialized due to slowness of the old platform. But once we migrated those workflows to Temporal, we suddenly started hitting those race conditions. There were activities in the workflows where, for instance, a customer was created, but the creation of the customer happened in the background, and we didn't explicitly wait for that. So we had to artificially slow down some of the converted workflows by adding random timers and sleeps in there to actually mimic that slower behavior of the old engine. So in terms of performance and benchmarks, I would say things got a lot better actually.
The performance of Temporal is at no point in my daily work nothing on my mind around that. It just works. You just have it run. I don't have to care about how fast it is because it does always what you want it to do.
It's kind of
Uh,
one of the core features of Temporal, right? Adding scalability
mhm.
and durability.
And everything is asynchronous, so you don't have to worry about blocking calls and stuff. Do you mind advancing one more slide? We're going to talk about our offering for Replay 2026, our annual user conference. We're giving 75% off on tickets as if you watch this webinar. And I hope to see everyone there. I will most certainly be there in San Francisco. I hope to see Jeroen, Yessi, everyone. So that'd be fantastic. So thank you, gentlemen. This has been a great discussion. I think a lot to learn here and a lot about how it can be applicable to actual problems in legacy systems within actual problems that people have in sometimes these systems that are still running on mainframes and they're decades old. And um, I really appreciate the applicability of this process to that kind of an environment, because I think most people associate us with AI and stuff like that, which it's great, but it still works for everything else. One of the reasons I came to Temporal is because it works with literally any company in the world that's making software that is in any way distributed. So that's very exciting. I can't thank you enough for being here, and thank you everyone for attending.
Thank you for
Thank you.
having us.